All right, and we are live. I'm Jesse Showalter, and I have a special guest today. This is Von Glitschka, designer, illustrator, design mentor, just all around kind of snarky guy on Twitter. So I'm just really excited to have Vaughn here with us today. So hey, Vaughn, thanks for stopping by, man.
Thank you.
All right. So just so if there's anybody out there who's watching who maybe doesn't know who you are, would you mind just kind of giving us your like 30-second Wikipedia bio?
Sure. I've been working in the industry for about 30 years now. I've run my own studio for the past 16 years. And over the last 2 years, I hired my daughter. So we kind of work together now. And most of the work we do is brand centric, usually for another ad agency or a design firm, and within the context of branding in some way, whether it's packaging or logo or icons. That tends to be what we focus on the most.
Right. Okay. Awesome. And then, so you are kind of like a hired gun. Is that like a good word to use?
Yeah, that's the way I've described it. Is I'm a creative hired gun.
Okay. And so tell me, like, when it comes to being a hired gun, when does a company or brand, if you know, like, when do they decide like we need to hire the gun? We need to get Vaughn in here because we need something spectacular. Do they talk to you about that when they get contact you?
No, but I kind of know the answer to that. Most ad agencies, a lot of people don't really know this, but for the most part, they're not doing the exploration themselves. So if it's and a lot of ad agencies have multiple creative directors, and they're usually assigned to an account. So let's say the account is some big tech company, and that tech company's new marketing venture, needs a campaign developed. And so they have a finite team in house that manages that account and takes care of everything. But to think they have the depth of talent to be able to do any kind of aesthetic or type of project, creatively speaking, really isn't the case. So what they do is the art director will source out different talent bases, and I'd be one of them. And usually when I'm working on something, I know it's me and probably about three or four other people that are developing ideas for this. And that's usually what they do. They collate all that, put it into their pitch, and then they go to their client. And they're not saying, hey, Vaughn did this or so and so did this. No, it's like, here's what we're presenting to you. And then based off of what direction the project shifts or where they want to go, kind of determines who they're going to end up using. And you're always hoping they go with your idea,
Sure.
but sometimes the direction I'm given is an idea the agency has. They can't really pull it off themselves. So I get those at times, and I'm going, I wouldn't really do it this way if it was my own client. And so those are the kinds where I go, okay, I'm going to get paid to do the exploration, but I doubt they're going to go this direction. And but when they do, then it's always nice because it means more work. So
Awesome. So I mean, you're a seasoned designer, illustrator, and there are a lot of people, especially like people who watch my channel, who are just kind of getting started in their career. And I
yeah,
know that like one of those things is you can always tell maybe like a mature designer between maybe a less mature designer with the kind of struggle between like creative control over their work. How do you balance that, and what kind of advice would you give to like a younger, like newer creative who's just passionate about the work that they do, but still want
yeah.
to get paid at the same time?
Yeah, I mean, that whole kind of balance can be soul crushing at times where you get really, um, I've heard it put, married to an idea, and then you present it and they like want all these to, usually it goes, oh, we love it, and then but is followed by all these changes. Well, you don't love it that much,
Right.
and so but that's the way, you kind of have to get used to that. I mean, I see my daughter struggling with it from me giving her direction at times, and it's like, and there was a couple projects we've worked in where she really wanted. I really think we need to go this way. And so I said, okay, I'm going to let you do it, but um, just don't be surprised if there's some pushback on it.
Right.
And so she's learning. I had to go through that. So it's all about, yes, you're being creative, but it's always within a context, especially branding. It's always within who the ultimate audience is. And as long as I really believe if designers can understand just marketing 101 and realize that's the most important thing, then there's a lot of room for exploration and creativity within that. But um, they're going to have a lot less frustrations if they just realize that it's not fine art. You're not creating whatever you think just looks cool.
Right.
It's intended for a certain audience, a certain marketplace, and but within that, you can still come up with some cool ideas.
Right, absolutely. My so I'm a designer. I do like product design, UI design, UX design kind of stuff. I stuck mainly to like the digital realm. My wife is a tattoo artist, a photographer, a painter, like just an amazing artist. And we have this conversation all the time. Art and design, are they the same thing? I'd just love to hear your 2 cents.
I I think in essence of creativity, yes, but I think design is obviously, if you're a graphic designer, it's more commercially focused. But there's a great little booklet that Charles Anderson put out back in the mid 90s, and he kind of addressed the topic, and he did a lot better than I ever could. But he said it's about approaching commercial art with an artistic sense. There's no problem with having something that's artistic as long as it still communicates what needs to be communicated. And probably one of the best examples of that from his work at that time was Classico was a new spaghetti sauce that came out.
Right.
And Ragu and the whatever the other ones have been around for a long time, but they're all the design is kind of homogenized over time. And so his approach on it was completely new. They put them in these custom looking, almost like handcrafted jars, almost like you canned it yourself. The labels were uncoated paper, specialty printing on them, and it launched classical immediately to a higher level than all these other brands that had been around for decades. But now you look at Classico, it's 20 some years after the fact now, and they've become homogenized again because that
Right.
tends to be what the marketplace does. Especially, usually it's controlled by marketing people, not creative directors. So
Mhm.
things tend to become, well, we need to look more like Ragu, and that's what they look like now. So um, I always try to. I think you can be there. You can definitely get artistic within the confines of a design project, um, but I've yet to see one that remains that way for any length of time before they tweak with it or change it.
Right.
I've done stuff like I did a branding for even a craft brewery based out of Colorado, and I everything I delivered to them. Well, you kind of lose control, especially if it's digital files after you
Right.
hand everything off. And they went on, and I see the labels now, and they've messed with the character I developed. They've messed with this and that, and I'm just like, oh, that just looks horrible now. It's like, why did you mess with it? Why didn't you at least come back and say, hey, can you try this? Or I don't know. It's like,
Sure.
well, I just do the best I can, and then once it's in the wild, I usually lose control of it.
I think that's an interesting way to look at it. Even like the terminology, like the wild, right? Because there's things that are outside of our control. So with that being
Yeah.
said, how important is, because we have to hand over creative control at some point, we have to put things into the wild. How important is it for you to have personal projects, passion projects, things that you can
Yeah.
kind of keep in captivity longer?
Man, that's in my opinion, that's the key to staying curious and always trying to grow as a creative person. It's like if I just sat around and just thought, wow, I wish somebody would hire me to do this certain style or this type of project. I've kind of learned that that never happens. And some of the best advice I ever got was from an illustrator by the name of Craig Fraser. And I was at an illustration conference. This goes back 2003. And I was sitting next to him in a session, and he had just had this book published with all of this work of his in it. And so I'm sitting there flipping through the book, and I'm going, whoa, Craig, this is cool. Who was this for? And he goes, oh, no one. I just did that for fun. Every single one was that same answer, because I hadn't seen those. I'd seen his client work, but I hadn't seen these other things. And about the fourth or fifth time that I did that, he just looks at me and he goes, Vaughn, you get the work you show.
Right.
And that was the single best advice I've ever gotten from another professional. And it's really true, is don't wait for somebody to hire you. If you're interested, let's say, in doing album cover designs, then just pick some of your favorite artists and do what you would like to do for it. And it doesn't matter if it's a real client or not. If it's good, it's good. And eventually somebody's going to see it. They're going to like it. They'll start following you. And that's always how things have led to work for me, is it gets on somebody's radar screen at some point, and they might not respond immediately, but over time, they see this you do and this you do, and then a project comes along and they
Right.
know you're a good fit, and then they're going to contact you.
That's great. Yeah. So tell me, so on that note, right? So you have passion projects. These are things that stir us up. We put the work out in the world, like you said, that we want to do, and eventually people see those, and maybe it turns into something while you're in the meantime, when you're grinding and doing the stuff that's paying the bills. How do you
Yeah.
find the energy or the balance, or even the motivation to kind of step out into that more creative zone and experimental place?
I just always have something going. So when I have a few minutes, I can jump on it and work on it. I don't try to just, I get burnt out just as much as anybody else. So it's always having something I can jump on, even if I work on it a little bit, one day a week, then eventually I'll get it done. And then once it's done, then I can kind of post it and share it and get it out there. So, but yeah, I'm always trying to think of ways to, I mean, it's how there a couple recent examples of that is I had done some work, and um, I had done a doodle years ago, and it was just looking at this Abraham Lincoln face and just drawing it graphically. And then I reapproached it a few years later. The sketch was sitting up, posted up in my office for a couple of years, and I pulled it down and decided I was just going to ink it out on an iPad, and I did, and I liked it, pushed it to the desktop, started coloring it, and then it kind of led to this whole new style. Well, once again, I go, well, this is kind of cool. I used all Adobe software, so I contacted Adobe Create Magazine and said, hey, do you want a tutorial? And they said, sure. And so I did that. And then one of the creative directors at Adobe saw it, and he goes, well, could you do that for at Adobe Max in the workshop I do? And I go, sure. And so it's like, and I do a lot of stuff that it never leads to anything like that.
Sure.
But if you don't do anything, then you're guaranteed nothing's going to happen. So the more opportunity that people can discover you is always a good risk, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And even if nobody responds to it, it's like physical exercise. You're exercising your creativity, so you're just going to get better with your skills over time.
Right. I've heard from, that's kind of like a common theme from designers who have great work, great body of work, and a career that they enjoy, is they do things that they enjoy, they put it out there, and then things just tend to happen around it. And it's almost kind of like just a second ago, you were like, sure, yeah, I could do that. Like there's a lot of sures. I would
Yeah.
love to do that kind of thing happening. So do you find that that things happen more organically for you, or are there practically some ways that you kind of are strategically driving the ball forward for your career?
Um, a little bit of both, but it's easier after the fact and to look back in hindsight and then
Sure.
kind of connect dots. And when I've done that, it's almost always, I can trace everything back to decisions I made where I really didn't want to do something, but I decided to do it anyway and kind of step outside my comfort zone. And like the whole reason I'm doing anything for LinkedIn Learning now, or a book for that matter,
Right.
is because years ago the local college contacted me and said, "Hey, could you come in and audit our program?" I'm like going, "I really don't want to do that." And I almost turned him down, but I decided, fine, I'll do it. I went in. It was pretty good. I met a couple people, but that put me on the radar map with the chair. And then she kept following my work for the next year, and then contacted me and said, "Hey, could you teach in our program?" And I didn't want to do it full time. I had too much. I had to run my own business. I couldn't do that, but I agreed to do adjunct. And then I'd never taught like that before. I didn't know how
Right.
to do. I didn't even know what a syllabus was. So um, I started doing that, and it's through doing that I discovered that, oh, I'm just taking these projects I'm working on anyway. I'll just kind of document it and explain the process, the creative process. And I saw that students loved it, and then I started sharing it online through a site I used to have called Illustration Class. And then that led to getting invited to speak at a design conference. And I did that. And then I had a publisher come up to me after one of those talks and said, "You should write a book." And I was like, I don't want to write a book." And I put her off for a year. And but it's like just one thing after another. So I like to say um, I'm a, how do I put it? I'm a reluctant educator. I didn't really set out to do it, didn't really
Right.
want to do it. It just kind of happened, but I enjoy it now because um, I convinced LinkedIn Learning to let me just do a weekly thing so I could do
Right.
whatever I wanted to do. So I figure if I'm going to be doing personal projects, I might as well have some way of getting paid for it. So,
Well, I think that's
yeah.
what makes you a better person to learn from, a better mentor, than maybe others, because you're a person who is head down. Hey, I just want to do good work. You're that kind of person. And then somewhere along the lines, you got roped into doing lynda.com or LinkedIn training, and those courses are great. I just ordered your book, the Vector Basic Training book, so I'm excited. It's like on its way. So like,
Cool.
so those are the types of people, like genuine people, humble people that just want to do good work, that I think that's the type of person I learn from best. What type of people or what ways do you learn and grow as a designer?
Once again, hindsight, as I look back and working with people at different jobs, like I worked for other people for 15 years before I went on my own. And the best way I worked is, I remember when I started at Upper Deck, they do trading cards, sports memorabilia, that kind of stuff. And I was in this one designer's office and I'm watching him work in Photoshop and I'm going, "Wait a minute, what'd you just do there?" And he showed me and I go, "I didn't even know you could do that." And it's
Right.
like, and this was before online training and all these stuff. I never was going to read a book on Photoshop to try to learn it, but everything I learned, I kind of learned by seeing somebody else do it. And um, I just go, and that makes sense. And so you kind of snap it into your own process. You see something else. Working with a lot of agencies over the last 15 years, I see how they organize a branding project, questions they ask, creative briefs they put together. And I've kind of cherry picked the things I've liked the most from all of those and kind of use that on my own. And so that's helped me to refine my process. That's why I like to tell people who are just getting into the industry, I don't think it's wrong that you could immediately start doing freelance work. I did freelance work when I first got in the industry, but I really think it's important to work for other people so you get some of that experience that you just can't get any other way. And, uh, you know, I remember I screwed up this job at this one little design firm I worked 4 years ago, where at the time it was before digital prepress. So we had to do what's called, do you know what a blue sheet proof is?
Yeah.
Okay. So we had to get those, and we were supposed to do these folding mock-ups so that, and then you'd have to paste each side onto it. So, and then you give that to the printer with your digital files so they would know how the inside relates to the outside.
Right.
I thought it was just obvious. We're doing a brochure, so is it really that hard to figure out what the orientation is? And I didn't do a folding dummy, and the printer printed the inside upside down. And at the time, the grunge look and feel was really popular. So I tried to tell the creative director, just go to the client and say, hey, we're trying to be, make them, just sell it as we did it on purpose. He wasn't having it. And so that costs about, I don't know, $2,500 to reprint. So I kind of learned the hard way that way. Yeah.
So I think that is kind of a thing. Like it's 2019. Like there's so much online work, remote work. I work remote, like for my company, and
Yeah.
it is a real like enticing thing. I think for a lot of people. Hey, I could have a little bit more freedom, a little bit more time. But I agree, you kind of do miss out on some of that collaboration, some of the hard lessons learned, and I think even like you learn lessons on what not to do by watching other people. Not only do you cherry pick the good things, but you cherry pick the bad things, right?
It's like I learned everything about marketing, both good and bad, by working with other people. I worked with really good marketing people, and then I worked with those marketing people that want to play art director and try to control creative, and that gets really frustrating. It's actually how I coined the phrase where about marketing and the balance between marketing and design. I think marketing without design is design without marketing is mute. You need marketing in order to communicate. Right. But marketing without design is void. It doesn't have an aesthetic. So they both have to be there. And if I would have learned that earlier in my career, it would have saved a lot of hassles.
Yeah, absolutely. So I kind of wanted to know, because you spoke earlier about like you brought your daughter on board. So now you are kind of dad, creative director, boss, like all at the same time. So with that being said, like how do you separate work and family?
Well, she doesn't live here, so
that makes it easier.
Yeah, that helps. But she definitely takes advantage of the fact that I'm her dad, I would say, but that's okay. I don't care. We're a two-person studio. We get along good together. The hardest thing for me is after working for myself for 15 years, only worrying about keeping myself busy, and now, keeping another person busy. That's a little stressful at times, but yeah, we kind of, a lot of projects we're posting recently are a good mix of both of us. So
awesome. What do you do? I think that somebody who might be watching this stream now or later might look at you and go like, wow, like Stefan Glitschka, like look at the body of work that he's done, look at the amount of like accomplishments he's had, like, and maybe look at you like you're some sort of design superhero, right? With a cape like fluttering in the wind, like nothing ever bad happens, and you never go through like some sort of block. Can you just kind of speak to that? That's like a lack of reality, and just kind of encourage maybe some people who are watching this?
Yeah, I've had people say stuff like, I don't see anything on your site that just looks horrible. And I go, well, yeah, it's like, it doesn't mean that I haven't done stuff that isn't really portfolio worthy.
Right.
I've done my fair share of work just to, pay the bills, but I'm not going to put it on my website. That'd just be dumb. So I'm always for, show your best work. So if you have 15 pieces in a portfolio, but only 8 of them are like really well done and thought out, then just have 8, don't have 15. That's kind of the principle I apply. But I go back through my archive looking for something at times, and I'll stumble upon a project I did, and I open it up now and I'm like, God, what was I thinking? That just looks like horrible, you know, or I'll see how I've built something in vector form and I go, wow, I could have really used my book back then because
Right.
it's like it's not how I approach things now. So I think there's just a natural progression to a creative career where you're going to start off at one point, and as time goes on you're going to improve and your skills are going to get better, and it's hard to see that in the moment because
Mhm.
um, it's like a glacial movement. It's not some huge shift that happens within a day, which you're going to take notice of. It's something that you'll look back eventually and you'll go, okay, I do see improvement because that sucks. And I can't believe I actually did that back then. And I think everybody does that. So, and there's days where I feel like my motor skills haven't shown up to work, and I I
Right.
I have a deadline due. I have to do these comps, and it's like I do not feel like being creative. I'd rather just zone out and watch Netflix. And but yeah, that's normal. So um, one thing, and it was only when I started working for myself that I really started analyzing. It really bugged me when I first started working for myself that I felt like, okay, I'd land a project and we had set a deadline and I knew this is when I had to have the comps ready. And I found myself like, I'm going, why am I procrastinating? Why am
Right.
I starting on this? It took me years to realize that my creative process is, yes, take in all the information, but then I have to sit on it. I have to think about it and let it kind of gestate and start coming up with ideas before I start working on it. When a client approves something and I tell them, okay, I'm going to get started, they're thinking, oh, Vaughn's, you know, busy as a beaver working. We're actually,
Sure.
I'm not touching it until I've kind of let it, you know, steep and really think about it and work through the ideas. And then once I've done that, that's when I'll start sketching out ideas. And I think that's really important as a creative, is to really try to understand your own creative process, how you work best. Yes, you
Right.
might see how other people do stuff, and it's good to pick up cues, but it's really important to understand uh, how you learn, because people learn different ways. Like me,
Sure.
I cannot read a book and learn that way. I have to see somebody do it, and I have to visually see how somebody does something before I can learn something. And so that's kind of coming to that realization as I started my own business, kind of helped me realize, okay, I'm not procrastinating. That's just the way I am.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of people like that.
Interesting. Cool. I just like maybe one or two more questions, then I'll let you go. But next
Sure.
question would be, you know, how you get clients maybe like today is maybe different than how you got clients 20, 25 years ago. Obviously, there's like the notoriety thing, but then also just the technology, just the space has changed a little bit. So how would you tell somebody who's looking for clients, like they have a couple pieces in their portfolio and they're doing all those things. They're exploring, they're doing work for them that they're passionate about, but they're still
Yeah.
trying to find their way. How would you what kind of advice would you give for somebody looking for clients?
Well, I'm gonna point everybody to a video because I address all that in there,
Gotcha.
and I think it doesn't cost anything to watch it. Just go to my site, go to the consult tab, and scroll down the page. And there's a video I did with InVision last year. It's about an hour long, and it's all about building your own brand as a designer, meaning yourself, marketing yourself, promoting yourself. And I think if they watch that, it'll answer all those questions.
Yeah. Do you think, and this is like slightly a related question, do you think or realize that your portfolio, your online website is like not only just a place where you promote, but it's actually a pretty valuable resource, like for a lot of designers, like when it comes to looking at the type of work you do, looking at your process, just seeing all the things you offer and even your just your style. Are you aware of like that you've become kind of an influencer to maybe like a younger generation of creative?
Um, no, not really. I mean, I used to pay more attention to analytics and try to figure out who's looking at what, but to be honest with you, um, actually, I'm looking at this screen because I realize I don't have that desktop menu app installed anymore where I could click on a give me some analytics. But
Right.
um, no, I know I tried to set my site up in a way so if an agency or creative director goes there, they can easily pull down images and use them in a pitch to try to get something approved. Um, but I, I I like helping out younger designers because I know when I got into this industry, I mean, it's obviously before the internet and social media and all that stuff, but I really wished um, I had a lot of questions and I tried to approach a few creative people. I went to school in Seattle and they just never gave me the time of the day. And then the one agency I interviewed with after art school brought me in, said, "Hey, we want you to work on this campaign. If we like what you do, we're going to hire you." And I'm going, "This is it. This is my big opportunity." I go home. This was even before FedEx. FedEx hadn't come out yet,
Okay.
or UPS. That kind of dates it there. But I did all these comps for this ad campaign. Uh, Mailed them off to them, and then just like crickets, never heard back from them ever. And 4 months later, I see a campaign and they kind of use my concepts.
Oh,
And I was like, okay, well, I don't think I want to work in the advertising industry if it's that cutthroat. So I focus more on trying to find a design-oriented job at a boutique design firm. But there was a lot of people. I tried to reach out to people to get to ask questions and stuff, and so now I'm really kind of sensitive to that now. It's like I think more than ever before, the ability to find information online just means you could technically um, get a college education minus the degree if you looked in the right places online. That's the
right.
reality of today. Um, yeah, it's pretty amazing what is available to people now. So kind of being part of that is I like it. It's fun. I, I
Awesome.
like I like talking to young designers because uh, it gets it gets me creatively excited when I see them get excited about something. Um,
Which was going to kind of be my next and final question, which is, what things do you read? Well, you said you don't really like to read so much, but what kind of things do you watch, listen to?
oh,
Um,
I read. I'm a voracious reader.
okay, just can't. You're just not like big on learning like technique and design that way.
Well, I'm not into reading. I'm not talking reading design books. I never read design books. I have some and I flip through them, but I've never once actually read through a design book. But yeah, I read a lot. Like a decade ago, I made a goal for myself to try to read 300 books in the next decade. And I just checked a week or so ago and I was at 387. So yeah, I read a lot. The novels, nonfiction, historical.
Awesome.
Um, One of the best. I interviewed Bill Gardner from Logo Lounge a few years back when I did a talk about coming up with 5 alarm concept, coming up with concepts, ideas, and best methods for doing all that. And one of the things he said is you always have to be loading the chamber, meaning taking in information. And one of the cool things he said is his team every 30 days learns a new industry, meaning whatever they're branding and working on, they really dive deep into understanding
Sure.
that culture and everything related to it. And that's the part of design I really like because I try to understand a lot of stuff like that because that's the wellspring of where these associations and ideas can kind of come together and form something pretty cool.
That's awesome. Vaughn, thanks so much for taking the time. Thanks for jumping on the live stream with us. You're at glitchkastudios.com. You're obviously, and this is just maybe just like, you don't have to give me a big long answer, But where I just love your Twitter feed because it just is so full of sarcasm and just great humor. Like, is that just is that just come out of you easily?
It's my well, my daughter is getting on my case the other day because she says you post like an old man, and because I understood what she is saying in some respects, and so I'm sensitive to that. But it's like I tell people it's my stream of conscious. So before Twitter, if you're working with me in some design studio or at Upper Deck, and I'd hear something or read something, then my tweet is basically what I would say to you if you're working with me. You know,
That's
it's like that
awesome.
kind of thing. It's not distinctly business at all. I'm kind of all over the map. And if I'm ranting about Adobe, you know, something just happened with Illustrator. That's that's
Well,
usually what happens.
well, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to follow you on Twitter as well as just like online and just to see the courses you're teaching. You're offering mentoring on, is that right? Like, not only if you do like 2 hours of mentoring with you, you get like one of your books for free. That's like a sweet deal.
Yeah, yeah.
That's,
If you do the 1 hour mentor, then I give you a copy of my vector basic training.
That's awesome. Hey, there's Vaughn. Again, I really appreciate you stopping by. I just love your work. I love your personality, and I think that like you just offer a ton of value, maybe without even knowing it. It just kind of like oozes out of you. So I super appreciate your time today.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
All right, Vaughn. Have a good one.
Okay, take care.